updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy returning to our post-mortem with incomplete information, but post-mortem on local election results yesterday in Illinois and to some extent in Wisconsin. Pleased to be joined by Jeanne Ives, former state legislator, candidate for governor. She is the host of The Real Story. That's Sunday nights on these airwaves, 7 to 9 p.m. And she also runs Breakthrough Ideas. She's was much closer to this than I was in terms of all of these local races, particularly in the suburbs. So leaning on Jeanne for some insight on what happened yesterday, although it's a rather familiar story. Right. Jeanne, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, Dan. It's a rather depressing story, too, actually.
Yeah. Well, the depression hasn't lifted. Your top line from yesterday. What happened in most of these suburban races?
No, in most of these suburban races, we completely wiped out. Republicans lost. In Milton Township, we used to have every single position, lost every single one of them to the Democrats. In some cases, like the Democrat supervisor, she's never been to an actual board meeting ever.
What?
But, yeah. So she won. Our long-term highway commissioner, who's great, ran against a business agent of Local 150, and he lost. He's been in that position for a good 20 years, does great work. You can expect now that they will unionize that workforce and raise your taxes. So, complete loss there. Even our, Dennis Revelletti, he's been a long-time name in politics. He's losing right now as Addison's supervisor. Winfield used to be controlled by Republicans. They lost. York used to be controlled by Republicans. They lost. These are the township races. It's just West Chicago Mayor Ruben Pineda. He lost. Complete wipeout.
So why?
Well, I do think that they didn't have clear messaging in many cases. You just have to hit people between the eyes. I also do think that when it comes to anything that deals with education or mental health, people, unfortunately, are just willing to spend whatever it takes, and that's not the answer. And they just, for whatever they just do, they just vote for these people who vote for, it's for education, it's for mental health. But really, overarching, it's no clear message. Republicans just went on spring break and didn't vote early. And part of that is maybe we didn't reach enough people to tell them, although there was a big effort to make sure people try to early vote. But the other thing is I just think the unions are extremely strong in the suburbs, and they have built-in ability to turn out their people. Behind every teacher, you can at least get 5 more people, and all you need to do is send an email from the union to tell people who to vote for. And their salaries on the line and their control is on the line, so they show up.
Any victories at all? Do you see a victory with the mayor of Arlington Heights? I wasn't paying too much attention to Arlington Heights, to be honest with you. I'm not sure, did the conservative win in that race? Yeah, Jim Tingliana, he won handily, which is one little ray of sunshine, I guess, today.
Well, more so, we just talked about the King County sales tax referendum going down. We also talked a little bit earlier in the show, we got a call from Mantino, and the Mantino Freedom Party that made the election basically a referendum on the J.B. Pritzker Chinese Communist Party joint there. They were successful, but it's hard to find other bright spots.
Mantino, I know a lot about Mantino. Those folks worked really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And they identified their issue. They identified the people who were not on their side when Goshen came in, lied to the community, hid information from the community. They're embroiled in a lawsuit. So that's been constant information stream to the voters about what's going on. And I think that's part of they won because of that. They were very clear on what they needed to do. Unfortunately, they do not still control that board because the mayor does not have a voting position unless there's a tie. So it's a 4-2 board with the mayor, but they made a lot of strides, and they can come back in 2 years and clean it up. So that was a huge success. But, I mean, Mayor Pekow's loss in Orland Park, I mean, honestly, I think Keith is the best mayor in the entire state, and he's done so much good for that. And he got wiped out because of mixed messaging from Rhino Republicans about who was the Republican in the race, because Trump won that race 57-43, but that got really, it was such a nasty race.
Well, and just to use that as an example, too, and one of the reasons that sensible people don't want to get involved, some sensible people, and the grifters do, is, I mean, as you know, I mean, Keith was slimed for years with illegal and phony robocalls that attacked him and his wife. I mean, that said slanderous things, even for a public official, slanderous things about Keith and his wife. And, you know, you can never trace them down. And you know, we have a pretty good idea who's behind them, but you have to prove it in terms of any accountability. It's just those sorts of things. And you just build, again, basically a coalition of the bedwetters and the ankle biters and the grifters. And you can, as you say, you confuse some people by saying, oh, Jim Dodge is the Republican endorsed candidate and this and that, more lying. Then you know, you can hoodwink the electorate. It's not the first time it's happened.
Yeah, no, but I mean, they also cleaned up on that Orland Fire District. Now, that Orland Fire District is just ridiculous. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on some sort of media consultant just to put out a press release like once every quarter. They spent $18,000 in that Orland Fire District and they paid a diversity consultant who was incarcerated in federal prison, and they still paid her. I mean, it's complete malfeasance. Finally, at the end of the day, the fire union finally said, hey, we want some accountability to the Orland Fire District for their spending on some of this stuff. But it wasn't too late to, you know, and they didn't turn out the right people. So, I mean, the messaging, the clearness of it really matters. You know, Republicans just need to show up. I mean, you're right. If Republicans showed up, we would win a lot of these races. They just stay away. For example, the Warrenville race, the mayor's race, okay, total of 2,490 votes won that race for mayor. They elected Andy Johnson, who sat on the Wheaton School District Board for probably 15 years, something like that. He's the person who lied to the people about the Hubble Middle School being worth $25 million. They sold it for $5 million. Then they built a $58 million rooftop garden middle school that's only at 65% capacity. And he's the one who gave Catalani a retirement package that included paying his family's health insurance for 15 years post-retirement. And they elected him now as the mayor. I mean, he's just he doesn't care about taxpayer money, but the unions turn out who they want to, and that's to Warrenville. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Well, the other thing, too, is, I mean, so like Manteno is a good example. You know, when your community is really formally under siege, then people's attention is galvanized. But I mean, so many of these suburbs, I mean, you know, you talk to them, I have friends too. I mean, the entire community is like on one big morphine drip. I mean, they're just sort of numb, and they're just sort of floating around. They have no idea. They have no idea what's going on at their schools. I mean, you know, we act like people listen to this show or consume the same news sources that we do, you know, have seen all the charts and graphs from wire points and are aware of that Illinois has the highest combined state and local tax burden and this anemic economic growth, and look at the student spending versus the student results. And they don't know any of this. They don't know any of this, and they don't seem particularly motivated to find out. They just seem motivated to stay numb, and it's just tough to penetrate.
Well, and then you've got like the races in Elmhurst with Chavez losing after that shameful personal PAC mailer comes out, just smearing him with a bunch of leftist buzzwords. The same thing in the Andrew Cat race in Hinsdale. He lost as well. And we try to highlight those issues when we found out about them. Wrote really good articles. Higgins wrote definitive articles on what we tried to share that. We tried to boost it. It was a little bit too late on the Catton story, but people have no idea how Marxist their school boards are and how much money they control. I mean, in District 200, they have control of $200 million budget, plus they're going to control $151 million of spend on 3 middle schools that they're expanding. It's outrageous amount of money they control, and people don't pay attention. And taxes are going to go up, and they're going to go up all the time, and people don't seem to understand. And it's just very, very difficult and discouraging to try and connect the dots for voters much more.
Well, what do you think? Where do we go from here? You don't have a functioning Republican Party that has any particular raison d'etre, that is doing anything that is noticeable. I mean, but you have all these issues because of the disintegration of the city and the state that is ongoing and is increasing in pace under the current political class, from the sanctuary city business to and all the spending on people in this country illegally in Illinois, and the confiscatory state and local tax burdens, and the declining quality of schools, all these things that people say they care about. I mean, where do we go from here in your view?
Well, I think, in 2026, we just really need a candidate who's got like a Trumpian type of voice that is unafraid to say what needs to be said and tell people the truth, and does it. And the media can't ignore that message when it's a sort of a governor's race or a senatorial race or something like that. They can't necessarily ignore it. Maybe people will hear it, and a big voice will help connect the dots, because I do think that people pay attention to maybe more the national situation going on, some of the state. But, I mean, just the idea that Pritzker got a pass after giving Goshen, the Chinese Communist Party back to Goshen, $500 million. Rivian, who's never made one red cent of profit, nearly $1 billion in tax incentives. I mean, this is insane, and people wonder where their money's going. They're wasting hundreds of millions of dollars on these nonprofits that do nothing, that should not be government funded. I mean, maybe that would help if in 2026 somebody with a big voice and a lot of money behind that voice, because that's what Pritzker's got, $350 million behind his campaigns. And by the way, Pritzker played in these local races. And his lessers too, like Chris Welch, came out to walk in Wheaton with the Democratic township candidates and the IEA endorsed candidates. Just sick.
Well, and not just one voice too, because it's more likely than not that Durbin is not running for re-election, so open Senate seat, which is obviously another important statewide race, and the prospect that even in midterm with Trump as the incumbent, there's a couple congressional districts that are certainly on the target list, maybe not tier one, but on the national target list, Kasten and Sorensen. So, it'd be nice to have a chorus and not just one person. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, they have to run in tandem and run together. I will say the 6th district is, part of Pekau's loss came because he wouldn't do some Gaza resolution, and the Palestinian Muslims who are concentrated in the 6th district, by the way, the largest concentration in the entire United States of Palestinian Muslims, and not Muslims overall, are in the 6th congressional district. Oh. And you know what? They are starting to, they come together, they unite with one voice, and that was their big reason to take out Pekau. And that shameful, robocall that went out about Pekau's wife, literally saying that don't trust your kid if your Muslim kid's in Pekau's, Betty's classroom, because her husband's a racist. I mean, that's the robocall that went out. I mean, it's just awful. It's just nasty, awful stuff.
That's slander. Is there any? I mean, I know you're probably working on trying to figure out who's behind that.
Well, I think Keith knows, but
everybody
can't
knows.
Do much. Yeah, everybody knows who's behind it.
Yeah, these rhinos doesn't even begin to describe these people. They're enemies inside the perimeter. That's another rolling problem. But that's the problem you have when you have no party leadership. It's just a warlordocracy, and it's been that way really, in the Republican Party, if we're being honest, in Illinois, it's been that way ever since George Ryan went away. It really has. Warlordocracy. Not a good way to organize. Warlordocracy is not a good way to run a party. The real story is Jeanne Ives' program Sunday nights on these airwaves, 7 to 9 p.m. Former state legislator, gubernatorial candidate Jeanne Ives. Jeanne, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
Feeling the aches and pains of everyday life slowing you down? Introducing Blue Emu, America's #1 emu oil formula for pain relief. In a recent clinical trial, 91% of users saw improvement after using Blue Emu. Whether you're working hard, playing harder, or just staying active, Blue Emu penetrates deep to relieve joint and muscle pain fast. And best of all, you won't stink. Join the 91% who felt the difference. Find Blue Emu at your local retailer or online. Blue Emu works fast